Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to make a dandelion tincture. We're sort of at the tail end of our dandelion season here, at least where we live in the UK, and I have gone through the flower heads that I had foraged. I made a infused oil with the flower heads, a dandelion infused oil, and then made a salve with that oil. Super nourishing, really basic salve, but it got me thinking that I wanted to make another batch of dandelion root tincture. I don't have any flower heads left, and I also don't have any dandelion leaves left. You can use the whole plant to tincture or make salves. If you forage your own root, which you totally can, just use a shovel and dig really deep under the dandelion and you'll pull out the big long roots. They're quite woody. Rinse them off fully. I like to use like a metal scrubber to get all the dirt off. You want to chop them up into smaller pieces, like maybe 1/2 inch long pieces, and then you want to dry them. The way I do this is use twine to it's a little bit time consuming, but to tie a knot around the piece of dandelion root and then make a long chain of little pieces of dandelion root hanging, and then just hang them up to dry. It does take, I tend to leave mine for 2 months to dry, so it can take a little bit of time, but you can do a huge batch at one time, and then once it's dried, it lasts for, forever, basically, if it's totally dried. So you can do a big batch one summer and then have dandelion root ready for use for years to come. The reason that you want your root to be dried before you use it to make tinctures is because it will have a lot of moisture content in it, which can make your tincture be diluted by the water and spoil more quickly. If you don't have the patience for it and you don't want to forage your own dandelions, you can buy them online easily. I'll leave a link to the ones I bought this time in the description. If you are interested in other tinctures that you can make during the summertime with fresh ingredients, I've made a downloadable guide with 6 great tinctures to make in the summer with all fresh ingredients that are growing in the summer. All the recipes are super beginner friendly with step-by-step instructions in full supply lists. If you're interested in that, there's a link for that in the description below. All you need to make this tincture is your dandelion root and some 80 proof or above alcohol. My preference is to use unflavored alcohol, so my tinctures are just the medicinal flavor of whatever's in the plant material. Besides dry dandelion root and alcohol, you'll need a clean glass jar to let your tincture steep in. Once it's steeped fully, you'll need cheesecloth and another clean jar to store your tincture in. Alcohol will corrode metal lids, but I still prefer using metal lids because alcohol can also extract some toxins from plastics, so I just avoid using plastic lids on my tinctures altogether. What I do instead is just put a piece of parchment paper between my glass jar and my metal lid. So the first step to making the tincture after your glass jar has been cleaned is to fill your jar about halfway full with plant material. If you're using foraged fresh dandelion heads and stems and leaves to make this tincture and you really don't want to wait for those to be fully dry, I would still recommend that after you wash and dry everything, that you let it sit out on paper towel for 1 to 2 days so some of the moisture can evaporate off of the plant material, and then consider using a higher proof alcohol. You can find Everclear, which is very high proof alcohol. That'll make sure that any water content that's in the tincture as it steeps is offset by that heightened alcohol content. So I'm going to open this bag of dried root and put it into my glass jar. So it's a little bit more than half. If you are using dried plant material, filling your jar halfway full is what I tend to do. If you are using fresh plant material that's just been dried for a few days, you want to make sure that you tamp it down in the jar so you can fit a lot in there and fill it about 3/4 of the way full. Dried plant material, you can fit a lot more of it into a jar, and so your extractions tend to be potent. But with fresh plant material, in order to have a potent tincture, you need to take care to really tamp it down and fit a lot of plant material into the jar. Fresh plant material will have all of the medicinal benefits just readily available, whereas dried plant material could have been harvested a long time ago, or it could have been heat treated, and so some of the nutrients would have been lost over time or in those processes. And so just know that if you're using fresh plant material, you really want to pack it in there so your tincture is still concentrated. So now I'm just going to cover the dandelion root in alcohol. I'm going to cover it all the way to the top of this jar. You can use any size jar that you want. You don't have to use the exact measurement that you're going for. You could use a quart jar or whatever. You don't have to fill the whole quart jar, obviously, with that much alcohol unless you want that much tincture. You just want to make sure that however much root you use, however much plant material you use, you are covering it completely with alcohol. You don't want any plant bits and pieces sticking out of the alcohol because that will go moldy and potentially spoil your tincture. You just want everything below the alcohol because alcohol is a really great preservative. If you want a more specific measurement, I usually go for half a cup of dried plant material to 1 cup of alcohol. I've covered it with alcohol. When you use dried plant material to make tinctures, sometimes the plant material takes, a day or so to really absorb some of the alcohol in it. When you check on your tincture, some of the plant material will be sticking out because there's not enough alcohol anymore. So just top it up. Keep an eye on your tincture every day or so to see that everything is still below the alcohol. And you can just, if it's not, just top it up with some more. So now I'm going to put a lid on this. So I've added a tight lid to the tincture and I'm going to just shake it a little bit to keep everything moving, make sure that the alcohol has gotten all the way to the bottom and there's no roots that haven't been exposed to some alcohol. I'm going to label and date what it is so I know what it is and when I made it, and then I'm going to set it in a cool, dark place for about 8 weeks. I would recommend that every day you go and check your tincture to make sure that everything is below the alcohol, and you just give it a little shake like that so everything is moving. Because I just made this, I'm not going to strain it off, but what you do to finish your tincture is after 8 weeks, go in and take the lid off and then use a piece of cheesecloth or a mesh strainer to strain off the tincture, and then you just add it to a bottle. Here's how mine is looking after only about 4 days. I use these little dropper bottles. You don't have to have these, but the reason I like them is because they make dosing really straightforward because they have the little pipette or the dropper. In terms of dosing, I always will tell you that I'm a self-taught herbalist and definitely speak to a doctor or certified herbalist about what you're experiencing, any prior health conditions, all of that stuff. What I do is if I'm taking it for helping digestion, I will take it before a meal, put about 1 dropperful into a glass of warm water. And if I'm using it for overall antioxidant boost, I will use a dropperful 1 to 2 times a day, like morning and night usually. It should last years. You want to look for an off smell, mold growing on it or something like that. But again, alcohol is a very good preservative, and so tinctures can really last a long, long time. To take the tincture, you can add it to a cup of tea. That way you don't have to worry about the flavor. You can add it to juice, warm water, or you can just take it directly under your tongue, which is what I tend to do. So that is how you make dandelion tincture. So simple to make. Let me know how you get on making your dandelion tincture. And until next time, thank you for stopping by, and I will speak to you in the next video.